The one and only Garland Nixon is up next. Let's hear from Garland. Garland, you are a radio talk show host and a political analyst of the first rank, so you'll be able to answer, I think, this first question. Is Hillary Clinton bound for jail?
No, to be quite frank, I don't think that I put it like this. I'm not one of the people who has confidence that the Durham investigation is on the up and up. We have found out this week, I'll put it like this. Something that we already know was reinforced in that Hillary Clinton was in the midst of the Russiagate hoax. During the trial of one Michael Sussman, who was a lawyer for the Clinton campaign, who went to the FBI with some false information about Trump and Russia, one of many people who did that. He has been charged with lying to the FBI in that we are to believe that the FBI didn't know that a Clinton campaign lawyer whom they had previously worked with as a Clinton campaign lawyer wasn't a Clinton campaign lawyer. Somehow they must have forgotten it between the first time they worked with him when he was working with on the DNC servers and after that. But at any rate, so apparently an FBI agent at some point during the trial did testify that Hillary Clinton, no, it wasn't an FBI agent. In fact, it was the one and only Robbie Mook, who was one of Hillary's close associates and confidants. It admitted that Hillary Clinton herself did give the green light for releasing the information, the false information about the alleged server that tied Donald Trump to some Russian whoever. That was never quite clear who he was talking to in Russia. But at any rate, I just don't have any confidence that John Durham is going to tell the truth here, which is that the FBI was knee deep in this, that they were actually part of the operation rather than a victim of false information, as seems to be implied thus far.
Yes, I mean, it's a useful exculpatory maneuver by the FBI to hold up their arms like the gendarme officer in Casablanca and say how shocked they are that the Clinton campaign was involved in wasting their time and their money and resources in a false, through a false set of accusations. But when you think of the actual cost of the Russiagate hoax, it was not just boiled down to the wasted police time of the FBI, is it? It paralyzed your country for at least 2 years and arguably has disfigured your country's politics until this day.
I would agree. And I think it was an integral part of the foreign policy of the United States as executed by the blob, which is a combination of a political, economical, and deep state machine that directs our politics. I think the biggest part of the Russiagate hoax was or actually the Russiagate operation was to ensure that Donald Trump was not able to do any of the things that he wanted to do regarding possibly withdrawing or reconfiguration of NATO and of some manner of détente or rapprochement with Russia. And I think it was to create an environment where he had to constantly push back of how tough he was on Russia. I think it was very, very successful. And now, of course, the investigation will continually show that the FBI was somehow victimized by person after person, that at exactly the same time that we are to believe that the FBI was being lied to, that a Clinton attorney was hiding from the FBI, that he worked for the Clintons. At exactly the same time, the FBI was hiding from a FISA court that the Steele dossier was produced by the Clintons. So if, in fact, John Durham is going to charge Michael Sussman with hiding from the FBI that he was a paid operative for the Clinton campaign, shouldn't he also be charging someone from the FBI who was signing off on court warrants and doing exactly the same thing, hiding that the Steele dossier was also paid for by the Clinton campaign?
What is amazing is that at least until now, there's no holding to political account of what can only be described as a criminal conspiracy that turned the world upside down, certainly turned the United States upside down. If there had been no Russiagate operation, there would have, I think, not been a Trump defeat, if defeat it was, and there would have been a Trump second term. There would have been no January 6th. There would have been probably no war in the Ukraine at this point in time. The costs are cataclysmically high, and yet no one is paying with their political scalp for all this.
I think what happened actually in that Hillary Clinton didn't win in 2016 was it postponed the plans of this machine that it intended on creating this crisis in Ukraine. They planned on doing it. They had overthrown the government of Ukraine in 2014. Hillary was to come in 2016, and she was to execute this plan where they would launch an assault on the Donbass and then draw Russia in. And then, of course, do what they really wanted to do, which is wipe out the European economy. I mean, let's be honest, the United States empire wants to detach the European economy from cheap energy, from reasonably priced commodities that they can get from Russia, and wipe out their economy so they're no longer economic competition and so they're under full control. So it just, well, I'll put it like this. The European citizens got a few more years before their economy gets yanked out from under them. The sad thing, I think, here is that I still see people in Europe and in the United States who are flying a blue and yellow flag or Zelensky's some kind of hero, and they don't understand that they are being sacrificed at the altar of this neocon world conquest imperialist project.
Quite, although it's rapidly falling out of favor now. You still see these flags, but far fewer than before. My neighbor, a few miles from here, was one of the first to fly a Ukrainian flag outside their cottage, but it's long come down and been replaced by a Scottish flag. The show is coming to a close, at least here in my part of the world. I don't know about yours, but that's for a number of reasons. First of all, the war is not being won by the NATO side, and we'll come on to that, I hope. Secondly, the economic cost of our involvement in that NATO-Russia war is beginning to heave into view, and it's not a pretty sight. And third, the true nature of the Ukrainian regime brought to power in this coup in 2014 is becoming clearer to people. Is none of that happening in the US yet?
In fact, all of those things are happening in the U.S. There's a great question about the $40 billion that has been approved to go to the Ukrainian crisis. Americans are very upset about that at the time that we've got any number of baby food formula, crisis. We've got an issue with the cost of energy going through the roof. So Americans are coming to the realization that they have literally adopted a country, and that this $40 billion is only supposed to last until September, and that the United States now is literally paying for the civil servants and paying for the health care for people in Ukraine. So that's definitely coming to a head. The other thing I think that is important here, and this is being discussed, and that is that we had a massacre where a shooter in Buffalo, a young 18-year-old white male, went into a supermarket and killed a bunch of black people, and he had a black sun emblem, the exact same black sun emblem that the Azov battalion wears. And that connection is being made, that discussion is being had, and the U.S. government and the U.S. media is working hard to push back on that, but it's not having any effect. The discussion is being had all over, and it's enlightening people to the reality that the United States is supporting a Nazi regime, a neo-Nazi regime. At the same time, they're hypocritically saying that they're opposing neo-Nazi white supremacy and all that kind of stuff at home.
Yeah, you've taken the words right out of my mouth. The US is the only country in the world where you can deplore endlessly, tearfully on television white supremacy at home whilst arming and funding the very same supremacist ideology in the Ukraine.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's really the discussion. I think that's something that I think here in the United States is going to be a problem over the long run. I don't think they thought this out, or rather, I'll put it like this: I think the people in power have gotten away with this, in that they've supported ISIS, they've supported these extremist, violent organizations for so many years, and they've gotten away with it. But in the United States, the issue of Nazis, it was like a pride in the United States that the greatest generation fought against the Nazis, fought against the fascists. They were legitimately demonized. And now people are quite upset and concerned that they're lionizing the Azov battalion as some kind of, great fighters and heroes. And the concern is, particularly with what happened with this 18-year-old boy, that young people want heroes. They want to be a superhero. And when you start telling young people, look at these guys, they're superheroes, they're great fighters, they are the toughest people, these young people are going to start going online. They're going to start finding out what these people are about. And their government has told them that those people are superheroes. Why wouldn't they want to imitate a superhero? So once again, the chickens are coming home to roost in the United States. The problem is these people are going to want to shoot Jews and black people and Muslims and people in trade unions, and those are the people that are going to be first in front of the firing squad. And those are the groups that the Democratic Party, Joe Biden, expects to support him first.
I'm glad you brought up Buffalo. I wish I could unsee what I did see from the live streaming of the event. It was truly devastating, especially when one learns that the mass murderer was only 18 years old. How does an 18-year-old boy get that kind of powerful automatic weaponry and protective equipment that stopped him being stopped short when the very brave former police officer, then supermarket security guard, actually hit him with, I think, one round, maybe two, which would ordinarily have stopped him in his tracks, but he was wearing armor, which blocked the security guard's weapons. How does that happen, Garland? Talk us through in the rest of the world where such a thing is unimaginable.
Well, here in the United States, there are gun shows where people can literally go to a gun show and they don't have to fill out any paperwork and they can buy a high-powered rifle. It's the chickens coming home to roost. Bad news for the people of Europe. You're going to experience the same thing. The United States, for profit, pumps huge amounts of military-grade weapons into its own population. The National Rifle Association used to get almost all of their money from their members. Now it gets 70 to 80% of its money from the arms manufacturers. So the arms manufacturers simply see the United States as a market, and they do everything they can to pump military-grade weapons into our community. But guess what? They're doing the same thing, probably far worse, in Ukraine, and sadly to Nazis. Once again, people with the same black sons are going to be marching around Europe with high-grade military weapons, and I think the chickens that are roosting in the United States, unfortunately, are going to come home to roost in many parts of Europe also.
Now, one read often about some unhinged, crazed manifesto that this 18-year-old mass murderer had published, but none of us have been allowed to read what it said. You're a former police officer, a retired police captain. You are a former member of the American Civil Liberties Union. You're a well-informed journalist. What motivated this 18-year-old to do this heinous act?
When we look at this, there is some history. We see this time and again. This is a young man who had a history of some level of mental illness. Apparently, this is a young man who had been picked up in the past for making threats in his high school to do similar things. So this is a person that had a track record that pointed to a reality in which he may some way act out in this manner. I think the problem is that two problems. Number one, it wasn't followed up on but even more importantly, as we keep discussing, it is far too easy for people to get their hands on military grade weapons in the US. And of course, the United States is lionizing neo Nazis and violent extremists time and again. And I believe that the combination of this, whatever mental illness this child had, his propensity towards violence, and certainly, I don't think it's an accident that at the exact same time the United States is lionizing people who are running around goose stepping, screaming Sig Heil, that this guy should suddenly figure out that that's the direction he wants to go in, that he wants to dress like them and act like them. I truly believe that this will not be the last instance of the United States of Azov style violence. Let's not forget the Christchurch shooter in New Zealand had claimed that he had been to Ukraine and had the exact same black sun symbol. I think we are seeing it just as a few years. We remember we saw all the stabbings and all of the violence from ISIS and the Manchester bombing, etc. Once again, the violence and the foreign policy of the U.S. empire is visiting itself among its citizens in both violence and, unfortunately, in economic disaster, which is a whole nother story.
Last point, and I'm grateful, Garland, as always. Where is Trump in all this? Is he nursing his wrath to keep it warm? Is he ready to unleash it on the American political scene? Has he decided whether he's going to run in 24 or not?
At this point, 2024 is a long time off. Again, Joe Biden, who seems not to even know what planet he's on right now, claims that he's going to run in 2024. Donald Trump is not coming out and saying that he will, but he's staying very much involved in domestic politics and national politics. The interesting thing is, recently Donald Trump made a statement about the Ukraine conflict and basically implied that his position was that it should be resolved through diplomatic means. Noam Chomsky came out and actually said the only statesman in the West who has a reasonable position on this is Donald Trump. So I believe that as this thing goes bad, particularly the economics in the U.S., the economics in Europe goes bad, Donald Trump will be poised to win a Reagan-esque 48 states should he choose to run against Joe Biden or God forbid, Kamala Harris.
Garland Nixon, as always, thanks for joining us.